Hi, I'm Katie Farrell with Dashing Dish, and at Dashing Dish, I'm all about teaching you how to nourish not only your body, but your soul as well. Today, we're gonna make one of my daughter's favorite recipes, which is baked oatmeal singles. And if you love oatmeal, you will love this recipe. Even if you're not a huge fan of oatmeal, if you enjoy muffins in the morning, this is a pretty close blend between oatmeal and a muffin. So to start, I'm going to add my dry ingredients to a bowl. I have some old-fashioned oats here, of course, since it is oatmeal cups. And then to this, I'm going to add some protein powder. Now, I use protein powder on occasion in my baked goods because it's really good to have that balance of not only the whole grains, but also some protein, and that will keep you satisfied well into the morning and throughout, even into lunchtime, so you won't be feeling hungry or blood sugar crash right after you have these. So I just have a half cup of protein powder here, but in replace of protein powder, you could also use additional oats if you don't want to use the protein powder. You could also use peanut flour, which is a great source of protein as well, and it will give these baked oatmeal cups almost like a peanut butter flavor to them. So that's another great swap out if you don't have protein powder. Then I have some baking stevia here, and baking stevia is a natural form of sweetener that you can find at almost any grocery store now. It measures a little bit different than sugar in a recipe because it's a lot sweeter. So I always say start with half, taste it, and then go up from there all the way up to the amount that the recipe calls for as far as sugar goes. Then I have just a little bit of salt, some baking powder, and some cinnamon. And the great thing about this recipe is really you can make it your own. You can add different flavors to it. You could add some berries to it. You could add, I've even done like some grated carrot before, or even some banana. So it's almost like a carrot cake oatmeal cup or a banana bread oatmeal cup, all different kinds of flavors. And the only thing you really want to pay attention to is when you're baking that you swap out the wet ingredients for wet and the dry for dry. So here I have some applesauce, and if I wanted to make these banana bread oatmeal cups, I could just do mashed banana instead of the applesauce. And that's really the only trick and key to baking, is you want to always make sure, since it is a science, that you swap things out in good exchange. And then we have some plain Greek yogurt here. Now, if you can't do dairy, you could just add, again, some banana, some more applesauce, or you could even do some pumpkin. I've done some pumpkin versions of these, especially around fall. That's nice. And then some organic maple syrup or some honey. And that adds just a little bit more sweetness, but it also helps bind them together when they bake. And then 2 eggs. And you can see I'm just mixing everything in one bowl here. I just did all the dry first, mixed it up, and then I'm adding my wet ingredients. And then I'm going to stir this all up together until it forms a batter. And this is, like I said, my daughter's favorite breakfast recipe. My daughter was a very picky eater when I first started. She was about 6 months old, and I started her on sweet potato puree and some bananas and all these different foods that everybody was raving that their babies just loved. And Maddie was not taking to anything. I mean, she would literally spit everything out in disgust. And I was like, oh, great. What is going to happen here? Do I have a picky eater or what? And then I actually got her to try, well, I kept trying over and over different things, but I got her to try some applesauce. And when she tried that, it was the first thing that she liked. And so what I did was I just was really patient. It was hard, but I just kept trying different foods mixed in with some applesauce puree, and then eventually she started to eat more and more, and she would try different things. And so now she is 1.5 years, and so she is eating, you know, all solid foods now, and so this is one of her favorite things to have for breakfast. And I actually call them cookies, and she calls them cookies, and so she's like, cookie, when she wakes up, and she knows that this is her breakfast, and I love it because it's really nutritious for her. I don't do protein powder with Maddie because I don't really love to use it for kids, so I just swap out the protein powder for old-fashioned oats when I make them for her. But when I make them for Sean and myself, my husband and I just use the protein powder. So I'm just scooping this batter into a muffin tin, and you'll want to have this lined with cupcake liners, just like you can see. You could also use an ice cream scoop. I like the ones that kind of release the batter into the muffin pans, but you could use a measuring cup. I do a 1/4 cup in each one. And you know, speaking of being a mom, it has definitely taught me so much. I think the thing that it's taught me the most is to really rely on the Lord. You know, when I first had her, I tried to do everything on my own and in my own strength. And I realized that I really wasn't leaning into God's grace like I needed to. And granted, I was sleep deprived. I was a brand new mom. I had no clue what I was doing, just like every new mom. But, you know, over the months and as time passed, I really realized that no matter what, no matter how sleep deprived I was, I really had to make sure that I had, you know, a priority of spending time with the Lord each day, even if it was just a quick 10 minutes in the morning before she woke up, because I needed God's grace, just like we all do every single day. And so what I've really learned about that is that ultimately God makes a promise that when we lean into him, that he will give us the grace and the strength to do everything he's called us to do. And part of that, for me, is being a mom. And so I've really realized that I don't need to be a perfect mom. I don't need to do everything right. That's not what Maddie needs. But what Maddie does need is a mom who leans into Jesus, and a mom who relies on the Lord, and also that she can see that I'm praying every day for her, and that she can see Sean and I praying together. And I believe that's really what God has called us to do as moms, is just to lean into him and rely on him for his strength and his ability to do everything that we need to do. Because ultimately he created them, and so he knows what they need even more than we do. And then I'm going to top these with just some chocolate chips, just because it makes it a little more appealing and fun, especially for kids. But you don't have to. You could top them with nuts as well, or a little more cinnamon, or whatever you like. Even some berries, like I said, that would bake up really wonderful. Maddie loves strawberries, so I could definitely do some strawberries on top here, and she would eat them right up. Sometimes that's all I can get her to eat, is some days just berries, and I'm okay with that. But you know, on the hard days, I try to remember that everything is really all about perspective and how we think about things. Even on my hardest days, I just think, you know what? God, you are my shepherd and I am your sheep. And I love the scripture in Isaiah that tells us that he carries those who have young in his arms. So he makes a promise that if you have little kids at home, even if they're big kids, but if you're a mom, that he is literally scooping you up and carrying you in his arms. And that's because he knows that you need extra care, extra grace to do everything that he's called you to, which is raise those children in his love and in his care. And so after you put these in the oven, you'll bake them for about 18 to 20 minutes. You can see how good they turn out. You'll know that they're done just by sticking a toothpick in, but you also can just see how they're nice and golden brown on top. What I like to do with these is I like to freeze them immediately after they're totally done cooling, and then I pull out one at a time, and that way I can just pop it in my microwave or just let it warm on the countertop and thaw out. And then I give them to Maddie, and that way they last for about 6 months in the freezer. Really, they don't last that long in our house, but it's nice just to keep them fresh. But they do last great on the countertop or in your fridge for about 5 days. So I hope this recipe encouraged you today, and to get this recipe and more just like it, head over to dashingdish.com or ctvn.org.